We've been talking a lot about music performance and the role of artists. We're going to talk about what happens at the front end of that, how you design for sustainability in the production side. And here to lead that conversation is someone who has more titles than Rev Yearwood has hats, but I'll give you two. One is founder of the Vans Warped Tour. Two is a professor at the University of Southern California. Please welcome to the stage Kevin Lyman.
For the sake of time, we're going to jump right into it. We're going to bring everyone up. They're going to do a quick introduction. I know we're running a little behind, and we're going to want to jump into this. Thank you for all being here. All right. Zach, would you like to lead it off?
Hey, how's it going? I'm Zach Sternberg. I am a production designer. I've been working with everything from small club bands to arena acts. And I also am head of product at a software startup called Teralytic that does Scope 3 emissions for industrial manufacturing, which is fun.
Hi, my name is Adrian Martinez. I'm a production designer and creative director. I founded a company called Sturdy. We do a lot of design for tours and album campaigns for artists, often both together. And yeah, happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm Evan Winokur, founding partner of Range Music and partner at Range Media. And before that, I was an artist in bands for about 12 years.
Hi, my name's Mickey Kirbishley. I'm a vendor, so I supply the technology to shows, lighting, video, audio, and the technicians that build the touring shows and festivals.
We got together earlier, and I think we could have talked all day about some of the things going on in the industry. But we've got a lot of young people here, and I always want them to be able to walk out of something. But something you had brought up, Zach, was systems approach. And I think we're going to kind of use that as something to build off in this quick discussion. But maybe you could do a quick, what is systems approach?
Yeah, so taking a systems approach means that you're going to zoom out and see sort of the big picture. So thinking about designing a show, most of the people in the room are probably just going to the concert and seeing the output of that. But there's a long timeline that goes in from early ideation and conception through that actual day-to-day execution. And understanding the implications of your creative decisions is super important, because from there you're having everything from sourcing, fabrication, building your show, and then thinking about how it's going to tour itself, how it's going to move, how it's going to pack into trucks. And so being able to take a systems approach as a designer means that you're going to, with every design decision, you're going to think 2 steps ahead. And having had someone in that driver's seat where you're packing trucks, where you're building things every day, is super important, because it's going to factor into your decision making out of the gate.
But sometimes there's a break, there's a flow to that. And where would that flow normally go? You had brought that up, Adrian, about we're only one-third of the piece of the puzzle. Where would that probably need to start to be successful?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with early communication, primarily between, from my perspective, the designer and the manager and the artist. What's the idea? What are we trying to achieve here? What's the end goal? And from there, figuring out, okay, as we break down, talking to vendors, talking to the touring agent, talking to the, Live Nation or AEG rep, you're going to get a set of dates, and you're going to get dimensions that you need to fit within, and you need to make sure that that end goal is going to be able to be executed within that, those parameters.
Does it normally work that way?
We're talking ideally right now.
Okay. So Mickey, you were bringing up, that whole deal about timelines are really kind of what could make us more sustainable. But what happens to you so often as a large vendor and your challenges?
Yeah, it's an ongoing conversation with managers, agents, designers, production managers, and stuff. If you when I speak to fellow vendors, the last couple of years, this conversation has been going around. We've sat at many of these events over the years, the ILMC, Polestar, this particular event, and the vendors are, we're always, because we draw so much power, and we are a big part of the footprint that a tour leaves, whether it's the lighting, video, audio, and the crew. We are the ones that have been. The question gets asked of us all the time: what can you do? How can we improve things? When you sit down with the vendors, the biggest challenge that we have, it's not the technology, because the technology has come a long way in the last few years. The LED technology we use now is a very low power consumption. We've worked super hard to across the board now. It's timelines that kills us. It is the timelines. Last minute decisions, last minute, everything gets pushed to the last minute, and then we end up air freighting instead of sea freighting, or we end up air freighting instead of sticking it in trucks to move it around. Very, very expensive, not only financially, but for the planet. That's our biggest thing, timelines. Yeah.
So timelines, as a manager, but as a former artist, are you able to have any of these discussions from? I always believe being a manager should have been on the road. If you don't deserve to be a manager unless you've been out touring, since 70 to 80% of our finances do come from touring, that you can have reasonable discussions. You were just mentioning like an artist you're trying to decide about going to Lollapalooza this year, and is there this discussion about do they ever talk about environmental reasons, or is it always a financial reason?
That's a great question. I think if the artists are environmentally conscious, it's a great thing, and it's always going to come from them, and they're going to kind of lead how they want us to tour. If not, I think we are always trying to give them best practices to have a small footprint, but also be cost conscious as well. And that goes back to that conversation we were having earlier outside, which is like, there's so many different ways to tour nowadays. You can tour on airplanes. You can tour in buses. You can tour in vans. You're going to find that model that's that Venn diagram, where it kind of hits all the boxes. But again, it really comes from the artist. And if we can inspire them to want to make change, they're going to be the ones on the first wave, pulling everyone behind them.
But I think it's really, as we have young people entering the business in many ways, if we are going to make a fundamental change, it's going to come from them. Because we do battle that old model. I deal with a lot of agents in my world, and they're in a hurry to shove those deals off their desk as quick as possible. And many times they're those deals that you have with Live Nation touring deal or things. So you got to put your mind in their perspective with that old model. So it's really going to come from the young side. Well, have you been working with any of your younger? Do you mentor? And have you seen any mentoring going on in this environmental space of the young designers coming up? Anyone can answer that.
I see it on the artist side. I see them getting inspired when they meet different people. I see some of them going to conferences like this where they learn stuff and they walk away saying, let's change how we work. I'd be interested to hear about the design side.
I was going to just first. One of the things that stands out to me is that if we can make everybody aware that every decision they make, every step of the way has consequences, and what those consequences are. Just simply, like you're talking about the artists now, I don't know how many artists really know that the decisions that they're either rubber stamping or agreeing to have any consequences really, other than the ones they see that affect them personally in that window. And it's not there's nothing bad about that. I'm not accusing them of being unaware or anything like that, but I think it's our job to just keep reminding people of the consequences of their decisions that they make, whether it be the products they choose and where they're coming from and what the timelines are, that whether, if you're buying something. And right now we have the issue with the Chinese tariffs, right? Which most people are fully aware of it. So it's easy to have a conversation with somebody, go, hey, if you use it, if you want a brand new Chinese product, which most of this is made in China, this LED screen, or these lights are made in China, everything, there's a consequence to that, a financial one, but also when the timeline gets killed, you have to fly it, and that So I think awareness is our job to make people aware of the consequences. Yeah.
Evan, we were having a discussion about a large artist having to move a large piece of equipment, and one of our first calls, and you did a little formula. like versus shipping putting it on a ship and then flying it? Like, can you without going too deep into can you touch on what your formula was? You did it really nice because you're an MIT graduate, so it's way above my education level. But I really liked what you did.
Yeah, so we ran, the scenario we were looking at was moving LED tiles from China to Germany, sea freight, which is about 22,000 kilometers, versus air freight, which is 9,000 kilometers. So a lot shorter if you fly it, but it turns out it was like a 5 to 2 emissions. So it was 2.5 times more emissive to fly the LED tiles than to ocean freight them, which meant that the air freight itself outweighed the entire production emissions of the tiles. And so then you start compounding that on like, okay, once they're in inventory and their whole life cycle, they're just being moved and moved and moved, like how does that compound? How does that compare to that initial product carbon footprint?
And that would go back, they had to air freight them because of? Timelines.
Because a sea container will cost you $15,000 and it will take a few weeks to go. An airplane, a 747, which is what they use 2 747s in that particular example. It's a real example. It wasn't a, it was a real life example, and it was $1.5 million. So the difference, and that goes on the ticket price eventually. You might not, no one will admit that, but at the end of the day, I'm not paying it as the vendor. I'm going to add that to my bill. And that's going to eventually trickle down to the cost of the ticket somewhere along the line. It's not just going to get absorbed.
Which the overall pressure, because we actually reached to a point, because I spend my whole life talking to young people, that there's a push down on ticket prices right now. I mean, I think we're fundamentally, we're just a microcosm of society in a way that, things are, credit card debts, people are really looking at that. Do you think that, if people stop going to shows, which a lot of shows are struggling this summer, things start happening, is there a moment in time where we can start reducing and making points that if you were more efficient, you would not be spending this amount of money, and then the fans wouldn't have to supplement it because they can't afford your tickets? Does a bad economic time maybe give us a moment in time to fix some of the stuff?
It's a great idea, like showing every person that's a part of the ecosystem of shows that you can play a role, and here's what it is. I wonder what the best way to do that would be.
I mean, it's a case-by-case scenario, I guess, but, it's interesting because I believe the managers not understanding touring really comes from that a lot. So they give up a lot of control to different people, and they don't know who they're giving that control to. So sometimes, like you were saying, it might be the production manager comes to the vendor and says, talk to the artist about reducing something. Sometimes it doesn't seem like there's a strong force within that team that can really start to educate their artists on that touring and as they grow in touring to get them to understand this sometimes.
That assumes that everyone has the same goal in mind. So say if production or creative is able to reduce their budgets, are the ticket prices actually going to go down, or does that mean that you just made more money, which is great for certain people in the food chain?
Yeah, but you were saying, all the vendors, you guys are rich, like you're loaded, right? Your vendors have big bankrolls right now, right?
Every vendor that survived COVID is still on a knife edge. I don't care who you are, especially the large, multidiscipline, multi-location global companies. They are all on the verge of collapse at least once a year, because the price of it, a moving light is anywhere between $15,000 and $20,000 per light, and if you're only getting a year and a half lifespan out of it because it becomes unfashionable and something else comes on the scene, and there's nowhere really to sell that product without cannibalizing your own business, so it just sits there. It sits in a sea container outside your. After a couple of years, sits in a sea container outside your warehouse because you keep it on your books. But this is all to do with sustainability as well as if a moving light only lasts a year and a half, it's a tough one.
So one point of sustainability, and anyone could grab this, is repurposing. Do we see much repurposing of things in this business, or how are we looking at that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I get to work with Tate a lot in terms of stage production, and I've had a couple of conversations with people over there where a lot of the decking that you're seeing from show to show is already accounted for from one tour to another. So just there, the stage floor that you're seeing is being reused multiple times. The lighting hopefully has a very long life, which is another part of this conversation is that the production elements that we're using, such as lighting, aren't used as long as they could be. So having to find a second and tertiary life for it is another part of the whole thing. But I do think that in terms of the staging and a lot of elements that you're seeing up there, the truss, et cetera, those things are being used a lot over and over, and that that is a positive for sure.
So Zach, you did mention one material that if everyone could stay away.
Oh, spray foam?
Spray foam, yes. If everyone could stay away from spray foam.
Yeah, when y'all go to Coachella next weekend, I'd like you to look at the stages and see what scenic pieces are made of spray foam and painted. That stuff's going in the garbage at some point. You can't reuse it. If you can build your sets out of metal and not cover it with some sort of enamel, something that makes it easy to recycle at the end of your tour cycle, then that's a huge win. So then you get both that custom and bespoke approach of your creativity and what you're trying to collaborate with your artists to dream up, but then also knowing that you're not going to have your show's not going to end up in the trash at the end.
Have you ever been able to have that conversation? You've worked with a lot of unique artists and stuff. And it sounds like they might have a little bit of a thread of sustainability or ideas about the earth in general. Have you been able to have that, like, let's don't use spray foam, let's use this or something? Will they have that discussion with you?
Yeah, in 2017, we had a pretty unique show out with Sylvan Esso, and the entire design was basically made of raw aluminum, and so we didn't even finish it, and it looked awesome, and we were able to fully recycle it afterwards. And then similarly, this year, I'm on the creative team for Gracie Abrams, and we have a scenic element behind our video wall, and our vendor, the Danes, as we call them, they're creative technology in Europe, amazing team. We actually recycled some metal brackets from previous tours with the National to be able to build this strobe box, essentially is what we call it. And it's like fully engineered, it's super slick, it builds super fast in a really small footprint. And that's all stuff that was in CT's inventory because of something we did 5 years ago.
Adrian, have you ever seen any unique things? Do you have any recommendations for artists how to be more sustainable, like in your discussions with them?
I mean, I think I would agree with Zach that it's important to just think of the elements that we're using in terms of how to execute the idea that's at hand. There's different avenues to be able to go through that with, but I think it's important to make it known what things we should try and avoid. And I think, from there, usually the only way is up.
Okay. I mean, we're getting close to only 10 minutes left.
Do we want to take any questions or
Yeah,
anything?
let's take some questions really quick.
Because we could sit here and talk for hours. We love talking. But has anyone got anything they want to ask?
Yes.
When you're talking about shipping versus air freight, how do you determine then on a tour schedule whether something is worth it, right? Like as a touring artist, you have to decide, am I going to make enough money to go to that country? Why is it important for my record sales, etc.? But I don't think the environmental cost usually comes in. Maybe it's, do we have time to ship it and we're planning to ship it, but how does that get into the conversation?
Yeah.
How does it pay off financially?
It's a good question. I'm sure there's loads, but as a manager, would probably be better placed to answer that decision making.
Go ahead.
I think it starts with what Mickey was saying earlier, which is time. If you have the benefit of planning a tour 2 years ahead, of saying, hey, you know what, right now my client or my artist or whoever it is in the studio, you know that album is going to be finished a year from now, 9 months from now, whatever it is, and you know that a few months after that, you're going to be on the road. So if you've got a year and a half out, if you've got 2 years out, that's amazing. Gives you the benefit of planning the perfect routing, of getting the right holds, of getting the right rooms in the right markets in a way that you don't have to jump from here to here, which then entails you needing flying, you know? That's the best answer I could give.
Yeah, and I was just gonna add that I'm working on I just finished working on a tour right now that's out, and we have shows in Miami at the end of May, and then we have shows in the middle of the second week in Puerto Rico, and that has been a conversation about like how are we gonna get the entire A show over to Puerto Rico because the artist is from there, and he wants to obviously put on a great show for his hometown. So. The conversation has become, let's go with local lighting. Let's figure out now what light products we're going to be able to, or fixtures we're going to be able to use that are going to be able to work exactly like what we're doing now. Same goes with audio. Same goes with a bunch of other production elements that we are going to need to obviously source or have there. And then additionally, being able to source elements like the staging itself, being able to create or make a second package that can get there on time, and then from there be able to, once the show's done in Miami, then that goes back to where it came from, and we're able to carry on from Puerto Rico forward with the other package and not have to get everything over on a jet in a couple of days.
The challenge, of course, is that everyone, like back in the day, you could go to Australia, South America, Central America with a B system. No one's seen your show. Now you show up in Argentina, everyone's like, "Where's the show? I've seen Madison Square Garden on my phone. Where's the show?" So you have to get really close to it, otherwise people feel let down.
Yeah,
you know.
For that same reason, it's important that we have these conversations early on so that we are able to source what we need. And if we aren't able to, then there's other ways to be able to problem solve that.
You've got to be flexible. As a designer, you got most of these products now, these lighting fixtures. It doesn't matter where you are. They're similar enough now. If you know your craft well enough, you can get behind that desk in Australia and you can make those lights look like the newest model that's just come out. There's elements like the stage design and stuff like that it's important to keep that integrity. But for lighting...
But all that planning is great when you have a long time. What really clobbers the environment is when you have a gig thrown in the middle by your agent. Okay, sees a big guarantee, sees a big commission, kind of confirms that gig. The money looks great. No one really discusses with the people that have to move everything at the last minute, and that's happening right now with some bands that was filled in. They played this weekend, and now have to fly. They got a gig in the middle of the week somewhere that's a good payday, but they've got to throw everything on 747s to get it there, and then back. So really that short. We keep going back to timelines and planning, but so often that gig thrown in the middle, or we've got to get everything over to here. We got to go do that.
A good example, what it's like yourself. If you decide to go on holiday at the very last minute, you're going to pay more for your flights, you're going to pay more for your hotel. If you decide at the very last minute that you want to go do a show, it's everything gets impacted. I want to say one last thing, because we've got 2 minutes left. We only had half an hour up here to tackle a subject that we've been discussing for 10 years and we'll be discussing for another 10 years, I'm sure. But we're here, we're in the building. We're here. Let's just talk. If you see us wandering around, the conversation after this is what's important, I think. We got to just keep this conversation going, get as many people into it as possible, and we can make a difference, but, education.
As an educator, I got to go teach a class, but for all the students out there, early planning, like doing your homework 2 weeks before the night before, it always becomes a better project and more efficient. So thank you so much, you guys.
I want to add one thing. If there's one seed that I want to plant here, it's this. Anyone here that works with artists at any scale, I truly think the way that change is going to happen here is similar to what Charlie Chaplin and Mary Pickford and those people did years ago by aligning and creating United Artists. The top tier artists now have an opportunity if they band together and truly create change and commit to here's what we can all agree on, here's what we're going to do on all of our tours, or at least try to do the best that we can, that is where change is going to happen. And younger generations that follow them are going to be inspired by that.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that it's really important to note that what happens on our side of the barricade production-wise, it accounts for just 1/3 of what, the overall emissions and pollution that comes from a live show, what results from that. So it's also really important that we think about, what happens on the other side and all the trash and all the food that we eat when we go to shows and where that all goes and how it's treated and recycled, et cetera. So it's a much bigger problem and something really important for us to think about.
Music's a team sport. Zoom out. Play well in the sandbox.
And as any good production crew is, 4 seconds left, 3, 2, 1. Loadout's done. Back to the bus, kids.